Well, hello again, everyone. You are watching the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be completing the touch-up on the Singer 201 with its fancy Centennial badge. Uh, Prior to this, I was showing how I take dry cotton swabs and then very lightly dampened with alcohol cotton swabs in a second pass as I go over the chipped areas of the machine's finish to get them ready to be touched up, for lack of anything more creative to say. Now, I'm going to be picking my brush size. Picking your brush size is a big deal because, you say, well, this is the only brush I got. I guess I'll use that. No, 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 no. You will not be happy. You're going to end up with a slathery mess here. Less is more. When you touch up a machine, it's best not to start pulling paint off and trying to. You will draw more attention to your touch-ups than you would have had to otherwise. So what I'm looking for, all of my touch-up areas, maybe the one on the back is a little large, but what I'm trying to accomplish here is basically finding a brush that is, close, big enough to put enough paint down, but not so big that I end up with globs. We don't want globs of paint here, guys. We want something, the Goldilocks brush. Which one is just right? So if you buy a little set like this, and you might think, oh my gosh, I'm not buying all those brushes. That's expensive. No, I got these at Michael's Arts and Crafts. They're not expensive. They're soft. You know, if you were a fine artist, professional artist, you might not use them. You might use something fancier. But for my purposes, they work great. Now, this is the brush I have chosen. And if the brush is a little stiff, if you used it before, you can put it in some 99% alcohol and that will help. Now, I'm going to get a little bit more light here. And I'm going to go back to my gloss black. This, of course, is the Testors Hobby Enamel Paint in the little wee jars, wee size jars. And this is, again, they have them in flat black, semi-gloss, and gloss. I'm using the gloss here. And what I'll do is I'm going to be dipping my brush. I don't dunk the brush. And then you're going to see me take the brush out of the camera because these jars are very lightweight and it would be very easy to knock it over, and that's not a fun day to clean that up. So I'll show you, I'm coming down maybe less than half of the brush even with paint in it. Now I'm going to get that brush. You go over there, brush, paint jar, and stay out of harm's way. Okay, I'm going to start over here, actually right there. And basically, what I want to do is I'm going to start right at the edge of the chip. I think this calls for a little bit of a zoom. Okay. So I'm going to start right at the edge of the chip and just pull it and then stop when I get to the end of the chip. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but now you may notice the paint is still, I literally just put it down wet, and I was able to cover the chip like that. And then I'm going to basically stop. If I go back and I keep fussing around with it, it's going to give a brush texture and it'll draw more attention to it. The goal here is to do the touch-up in a way that doesn't show, or show badly anyway. Now, if your brush is not a good brush, usually that means it's starting to splay out and the hairs are kind of flying out. You may want to get a different one because it's hard to control the touch-up when you've got a brush that is not cooperating. So here I'm going to come across. Now I've got another area here. If I missed this little section here with the Q-tip or the cotton swab rather. Okay, so here I'm going to I have enough paint on the brush to basically, and this is something you'll have to practice. If you don't have enough paint on the brush, you have to go back and get more, and then you have to pull the brush over the spot again. If you get too much paint, you get a glob and you get a big blob, and that's going to dry weird or drip. So you want enough paint to see if you can get, basically, can I cover it in one pull? And there it is. And you will be tempted to go in and start feathering it around. I would not. Just don't worry, because remember, if you see, when you have new paint over that chip, it's going to first, it might even look a little bulbous or or convex. However, as the paint dries, it will shrink. Okay, so it will actually shrink and level out. We call it leveling in the coatings industry. They call that leveling. If you think you're going to need a second coat, you may not. Traditionally, paints like these, they cover really well when you have colors like black or white, maybe a beige. When you get into the bright colors, that's when you're dealing with paints that you may have to do more than one coat. They just don't have the same coverage, but you need to let the paint fully dry before you go to the second coat. All right, I'm going to come here. I've got 2 chips. Notice I just did that. I'm going to turn my brush over, and I'm going to come there. And that's it. I just did that one. Now, you might be tempted to come down and say, well, what about this next one? I'm going to go back to my paint jar, because if I don't have enough, again, I'll have to do it. I want to touch the chip as little as possible. Painting is typically more successful when you go in and you give it one good dab, and there you go. So I'll do it again. That one I didn't have to pull very far because it was a little shorter. And we'll come over here. I have a little tiny one here. I'll go ahead and cover that. Let's see. Is that one? Yeah. Now these small ones, I should have enough paint on my brush to take care of those. And I believe this one also. Now, what do we have left here? I believe I have one down here on the corner. And if you forget one of your chips, you know, if you realize, oh, I didn't see that one, you can always come back and clean it with your cotton swabs if you didn't catch it. And then, again, you can always, and if you miss one with the touch-up paint, you can come back to it. It's not a big deal. Let's see, I have one that was up here on the top, but I'm debating that one. It's very tiny. I'm not going to use my, get the camera up here where you can see. I'm not going to use this brush on this one because it's too large. I don't want to draw attention to it. So I'll come back to that with a smaller brush. I typically like to use one brush at a time, otherwise my brush will dry out. Now, let's see. Oh, well, see, even I missed one. Look here. Or did I? You guys tell me, did I forget? There's one right there. I don't know if that's a scrape or scratch or what. And there's one here. Again, you have to decide, do you want to do all of them? You know, maybe you do, or maybe you just want to do the ones that show. That's really up to you. You know, this is one of the most subjective things that I think happens when we talk about restoring sewing machines. And the other thing to mention too is that black is even white is fairly easy, but black is even easier as a color to touch up. It's the easiest one to do where it you know it looks very nice. It's almost, you know, looks original. So again, I'm gonna come back over these little areas here. Now I gotta do a little dip in the alcohol because I can't remember. And you may do this, and if you have enough chips, you may be like me. You think, oh, I don't even remember if I did that one. If you did, If you're not sure, then just go over it and do it again. No big deal. The machine doesn't care. The machine does not care if you want to clean its, prep these areas again, just to make sure you've gotten it down pat. Okay. All right. So coming back around, I'll go back to my paint jar again. And the great thing about this is not very costly. I forget what the tester's jars cost. I don't know, it was $5, $6 Canadian. I think I have to order them online now. I think Michael's here quit carrying them. They have so many things there, but you may have a different hobby store. You may have Michael's in the U.S. and maybe they still have them there. I don't know. It's not always clear why certain businesses, they'll sell something and then you get used to it being there and then it's gone, and that's the nature of retail. Now, this particular chip is this one is interesting. I'm going to use my current brush along the back side here, and I'll get these taken care of real quickly. But for this one here on the pillar, right there, and this one down below, I may change out my brush. Might have to do that because I'm not sure. This brush may be a little too blunt. It may not be tapered enough. But for these edges, this works quite well. It is curious to try to wonder how in the world did any paint damage occur on this area, because it's just not very common. Okay, so I've gotten that done. I'm going to save this brush. Maybe I'll have a better use for it. Some people don't save their brushes because they think, well, I didn't pay much for the brush. Why should I save it? As long as the brush can be cleaned in such a way that it will remain soft and pliable in the future, there's no reason you can't use it. But if you're, they say there are two kinds of people. There are people who clean their brushes and people who toss their brushes after one use. I think I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Yeah, this brush is. Here's another one I'm looking at. It's too large. I'm going to end up with a bigger touch-up than I want. All right, I've picked this one here, and this says Artist's Loft, whatever that means. It says 0 on it. There's a numbering gauge system to artist brushes, but I don't even know if it's a truly standardized system or not. But some of you who are fine artists may know far more about that topic than I do. But I just basically pick a brush by eyesight, looking at how, well, I kind of went in further than I wanted to, but that's all right. Now, what am I going to do here? The first one I'm going to do is this one. And I really want to just hit it one time and be done. And there we go. I didn't really get much paint. I thought I had a lot of paint on my brush, but I'm not sure if I did or not. All right. And I'm not going to touch that one again. This one on the bed of the machine, I've got just a tiny little droplet on the end of my brush, a little bit more because that's a fairly deep chip. Let's try to zoom in for you all. So let's see what it does. And when I hold the brush tip there, the paint feeds right off of the brush into that chip. see, I may be able to show this to you in more detail. See if that shows up for you guys. I don't know if you can see it right there. There's a slight right there, everyone. If I can point to it without messing it up. Right here. Do you guys see that? But that is not bad. Now again, that will shrink if the paint on your machine is thicker than this, and let's say you do the touch-up, you're happy you did it just right, you didn't go crazy with it, and then it looks like when it dries, it looks like it sank. That's because the film of paint has shrunk because the solvent part of the volume of the paint is gone, it's evaporated. And that's a situation where you can go back with a second application if you want. Just remember, as I've explained in the past with these paints, you have to go back within a certain amount of time. I forget if it's 8 hours, or I'll have to go back and check. You can check online with testers, or you can simply give it, I think I give it 48 hours, right, to cure, and then I can go back with another. So I'm going to go back to my bottle here, and here I've got probably more paint than I had for any of these because I've got a really large chip, and I'm just going to start down here, and I'm going to pull just like that. And then I'm stopping. There's something I missed here. And that's it. Not going to touch it anymore. In fact, I want to make sure I don't have too much paint on there. But I should be okay. If it's too much, you'll see a drip mark. Now, if this can evaporate, I may have to pull some of that off where it was starting to show. I don't want too much paint. And again, I know some of that's going to shrink, but let's see what we have left here. Now I got to make sure I don't touch anything that's wet. Do they make wet paint signs for vintage sewing machines? All right, what's left, guys? Well, got that one little tip right there. I am skeptical. I think that's going to leave a bigger touch-up place than I want. So I am going to do something different. I'm going to take my little crueling tool. Thankfully, one of my viewers, or several of my viewers in the past, I didn't know what this was. It came in a drawer, and I use it often to clean machines, to grab a hold of threads and so forth. And they said it's for crueling. And I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to do is clean this. I dipped it down in the isopropyl alcohol just now. Make sure there's no oil or filth on it. And what am I going to do with this? I am going to dip this into the paint. Now, why am I doing that? The reason I'm going to do this is because the area that I want to touch up here is so small that if I can get just a little droplet on my crueling tool, if I can hold this up, you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to just put it in there, right? Now I have, just a little droplet there, and I'm just going to, now I got one shot at this. Well, what happened? Did anything happen? There we go. Now, this is I'm basically using this as something to hold paint. What I might do is come back, come here, and I'm going to try to pull some of that paint off. I'm not going to move it. I'm just going to touch with my brush hairs, and that pulled some of the excess paint off of there. Because when it dries, I don't want it to look like a big drop or blob. So we're just going to leave that alone. Sometimes, again, and you guys, you're watching me as I tell you not to be tempted to touch it, and you can see, I know you're tempted because I am. I am too. We often do that when we paint, not just this, but painting anything. So, again, I'm just rinse out my brushes here because once the paint dries, the brush is toast. I don't use these brushes forever. At some point, they reach the end of their useful lives, and I'll have to get more. But again, um, decent quality brushes can be had. When I say decent, decent for something like this. You might not do fine art painting with them, but they're fine. They're soft enough and flexible enough that they'll work for what we use them for. So there we go. That is the touching up of the Singer 201 Centennial Edition. And once this paint dries, I'm going to show you something here because you may have noticed this or not. When you come across, when you look at the way the light hits this, you'll notice that the areas I have touched up look a little different. They look, well, right now they look wet because they are, but they're a little glossier. As the paint dries, some of that sheen will recede, and then if the areas that I did not, I don't even know if I actually cleaned, I'm pretty sure I cleaned those edges where the paint is. If you ever get that to discrepancy, you could say, well, I could use semi-gloss black, or once the paint has fully cured and you're done touching up, you can actually go back with sewing machine oil and that will buff out. It'll help everything to blend in. And that, folks, is my version of touching up one of my favorite machines and one of the most coveted machines in all of vintage sewing machine lore. One of the finest straight stitches you will ever see on any machine ever. And this is not coming from me. You say, well, what do you know? You don't even sew. I don't. I mend things. I try to make napkins, and that's nothing compared to some of my viewers. Some of you are master sewers and you do incredible work. Basically, it's the sewing community that tells me this. They're the ones who say, "Oh my gosh, it's a 201," you know, or if it's a 301, or a featherweight, or a FOF, or a Bernina, or a Necky. We all have favorites, but when it comes to how quiet it runs and those incredible stitches it forms, there are just so many sewing machines in the world that can do something like this. Can create a stitch, and even though it's just a straight stitch sewing machine, it doesn't do anything else, nothing fancy, but what it does incredibly well. For those of you who love the 201, please share your comments. If you hate the 201 and think it's a piece of crap, put your comments down there too. Or maybe you're new and you've never heard of a 201, but it is coveted by many sewers as one of the finest straight stitchers ever made, and who am I to argue with that? Thank you all for watching this exercise in attempting to touch up a great machine from the past. And I will see you in the next video, because I am on my way, hopefully, to getting this machine put back in its table. And then we're going to see if it actually sews a stitch. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.